Today we're going to be hacking a TanStack Start app. It's really cool. I'm really excited to show you how I've done this, and I'm also going to show you how you can avoid this kind of vulnerabilities in your own apps built with TanStack Start. And along the way, we're also going to learn about the inner workings of TanStack Start. So let's get to it. So what I have here is a simple tech blog, and here you can see we have a lot of entries. You can also click on one of them and see the content of that blog. Now this is a tech blog platform, which means you can also log in. And right now I'm already logged in, but if you were logged out, you can also come over here and enter your email, click on login. And once you are logged in, you can go to my posts and you can also create your own blog post. So let's go ahead and create a blog post. I'm going to call this my first blog. For the content, this is markdown content, but for this video, I'm just going to enter some content. Now let's click on publish, and once it's published, you're going to see this is the content of it. And if you go back to the list, you're going to see these are the entries, and this is the blog post that I just created. And over here, we can also see the emails of the creators of each one of these entries. Now the question is, can I hack this part of the process? Can I pose as another user and create a blog post in the name of another user? So let's try to do just that. By the way, if you're still writing your end-to-end tests manually, then you should definitely check out today's sponsor, TestSprite. TestSprite is the easiest way to test your web app. Not only does it create end-to-end tests for you, it gives you a really intuitive interface for viewing and editing your tests. You can adjust each step on the fly by replaying the recording and editing all the interactions. And the best part is that you can also connect it to your GitHub repositories and let TestSprite automatically test your pull requests. If you want easy and up-to-date tests, then check it out at testsprite.com. The link will be down at the description. I'm gonna go ahead and open the same page we had as before, and I'm gonna try to create a new blog post. Let's enter some data. I'm gonna call this my second blog and some content again. And now before I hit publish, I'm gonna open the inspector, and let's open the network tab, and let's see which network call we are making when we click on this publish button. So I'm going to click right now. As you can see here, we have a post request, and this is a request that is creating this blog post entry. So if you take a look at the request URL, you're going to see we have our website, and there's a /server function. And afterwards, we have this kind of weird ID, and this is the ID of the server function. And if we go to the payload tab, you're going to see we have an object that we are sending in the request body. And this is a very weird looking object. But if we open it up and try to navigate through the object, we should find some interesting values. And as you can see over here, we are sending an email, a title, and a content. So part of the things that we are sending over here is also the email of the author. So is it possible to change this email and pose as another user? For that, we can simply copy this request. So in Chrome, it's very easy. You can just right click on this and copy as curl. And let's open the terminal, and I'm gonna paste what we have just copied. And let me make this a little bit small. So this is the request that we just made. And a big part of this request is just this block over here. This is the session token, and that's why it's so long. But if we take a look at the last part of this, you can see the data raw, and this is the data that we just took a look at. So let me come over here and try to pose as another user. For this, I'm gonna take the email of another user, and we can see here in the blog, if we go back to the blog post, there's another user called example@example.com. I'm gonna copy this and then go over here and change the email and send this. And now if we go back to the tech blog and reload the page, you're gonna see that we have added a blog entry as another user. So what we just saw is that the authentication in our website is broken. We can impersonate any user. So let's go ahead and fix it. So if we open the code of this app, there is a file here called posts.ts, and inside of here we have all our functions that we are using to create posts. So these are all server functions. For example, we have here this create post function, And this function is the one that creates the blog posts, and this is the one that is called on the front end. And inside of here, inside of the handler, we are saving or creating a new entry inside of the database. So if I command click on this create post, you're going to see inside of here we have our SQL query where we insert a new post in the database. So let's go back to the function. So what we have over here is the input schema that is passed to this function. So we are describing what we expect for an input, and here we are also expecting an email. So we're getting an email from the front end, and this is the big problem. So if you take a look at where this function is called, this is called inside of the new page, and inside of here we are using React hook form for getting all the data from the users, and one of the inputs is this email that you are getting. So in order to fix this problem, we're gonna first of all remove this email from the inputs, and then we should get the current user from the session and not from the input. After that, we can create a middleware. So a middleware allows you to do a bunch of things in TanStack Start, and one common use case for that is also authentication. So here we have this middleware that checks if there is a user session. If there is no user session, we throw an error. Otherwise, we call this next function, and this next function is going to be the server function where we are using this auth middleware. So let's copy this auth middleware and go back to our server function and then pass it over here. After passing in the auth middleware, we now also have access to some extra data inside of the context. So the middleware has the ability to add some data to the context, and inside of this context we're going to have our own user. So context.user.email, and just like that we are actually right now getting the email from the authenticated user. If you go back to the auth middleware, as you can see, this is the context that we are using. This is the session email. So now we can reuse this middleware in all of the functions that require authentication. But there's still one other problem, and that is we don't actually check if the user making changes is the user who owns that blog post. For example, it's right now theoretically possible to delete a blog post even though if you're not the user. For example, we have this delete post function that deletes a post without even checking if the user trying to delete the blog post is the author of that blog post. So what we have over here is not an authentication problem, but an authorization problem, which means that the users are able to do things that they should not be allowed to do. And in order to fix this in TanStack Start, we can create another authorization middleware, and this is going to be edit post authorization middleware. And there is a small difference between this middleware and the first one, and that is that this one is of type function. Now, while request middlewares can be used in different places, function middlewares are restricted and can only be used with server functions, but they also give you the advantage that you can also define expected input. For example, over here we are defining that we are expecting a user input to include the blog post ID, and we can also use this input inside of the implementation. So over here we are just checking if the currently authenticated user is the author by calling this function over here, and if a user tries to make changes to a blog post ID that they did not create, we're gonna throw an error. Otherwise, we're gonna call the next function. And by the way, the cool thing over here is that we are also basing this middleware on top of the auth middleware, which means that the auth middleware is gonna run first, and then we have our authorization middleware running after that. And now that we have our middleware, we can go to the functions that are related to an existing post. For example, delete post function, we can delete the input validator and pass in the edit post authorization middleware that we have just created. We can do the same thing with update post ID. So we're going to pass in our own middleware and also delete the post ID from the input, because the input validator of the function and of the middlewares are merged down. And if you want to learn about TanStack Start, I have just released my full course on this awesome library. It literally includes everything you need to get started with TanStack Start. And the cool thing about my course, if I'm allowed to say that, is that every concept comes with an explainer, and then there's a problem where you get your hands dirty and you try to implement a real user feature using the technical concept that we just learned from TanStack Start. And then there's also another part where I show you the possible solutions. And another thing to know is that this course doesn't just include TanStack Start, but also TanStack Router concepts. So if you're also using TanStack Router, there's a lot to learn over here. You can check it out at learntanstack.com. I'm going to put the link to that in the description. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.